The phone call came at 7:52 a.m. A neighbor had stopped by to check on the Sharp family, and what she found inside cabin 28 would haunt investigators for decades. 4 people dead, 1 child missing, and a crime scene that didn't make sense then, and still doesn't today. Excerpt: Police Dispatch Log, April 12, 1981. Plumas County Sheriff's Department. Subject states she found multiple bodies inside the residence. Requesting immediate backup. Caller sounds hysterical. Nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Northern California, the tiny town of Keddie was the kind of place people came to disappear or start over. A former railroad resort, Keddie had become a fading speck on the map by the early 80s. Overgrown cabins, cheap rentals, and a community that mostly kept to itself. Cabin 28 sat close to the center of the property, unremarkable, unassuming. Home to Glenna Sue Sharp and her 5 children, who'd moved in less than a year before, trying to rebuild their lives after a difficult divorce. Neighbors described them as quiet but friendly. The kids, John, Sheila, Tina, Ricky, and Greg, played outside like any others. Sue worked nights. There were no warnings, no threats, no indication that something horrific was coming. But on the morning of April 12, 1981, Sheila Sharp, just 14 at the time, returned home from a sleepover and opened the door to a living nightmare. Inside, her mother Sue, her brother John, 15, and his friend Dana Wingate, 17, were found bound, bludgeoned, and stabbed to death. Tina, just 12, was missing. The boys Ricky and Greg, along with their friend Justin Smart, were found unharmed in a back bedroom, asleep, untouched. Interview excerpt: Sheila Sharp, 2006 documentary. There was blood on the walls, on the floor, everywhere. I ran out screaming. I thought maybe they were still alive, but they weren't. The horror of Cabin 28 wasn't just the brutality. It was the questions, the inconsistencies, the strange silence of the crime scene. No signs of forced entry, no calls to police from neighboring cabins. And the girl, Tina, vanished into the woods, leaving only a shoe and her jacket behind. As investigators began processing the crime scene, more unsettling details emerged. Blood splatter patterns suggested a prolonged and violent struggle. Drag marks on the carpet indicated that the bodies had been moved after death. But by whom and why? Evidence report, CSU photographs, Scene A, Cabin 28 living room. Visible. Drag streaks lead from central living room to the base of the sofa. Blood pooling inconsistent with final body positions. Meanwhile, neighbors began to recall strange sounds, muffled yelling, metallic clanging, sometime around 2 a.m., but no one called the police. Whether out of fear, isolation, or something else, no one spoke up until it was too late. News clipping: Feather River Bulletin, April 14, 1981. Plumas County Sheriff's Office investigating triple homicide at Keddie Resort. Community urged to remain calm. No suspects named. What happened in Cabin 28 became the most chilling unsolved crime in California's modern history. But from the beginning, something felt off. The medical examiner noted overkill, multiple stab wounds to the chest and throat, along with blunt force trauma from a hammer and what appeared to be a medical tape dispenser. Duct tape was found over Sue's mouth. Her hands were bound. Dana's head injuries suggested a violent struggle, while John's body lay closest to the front door. Autopsy report, Plumas County Coroner's Office. Cause of death, blunt force trauma, consistent with hammer. Additional sharp force injuries. Evidence of manual restraint. Investigators quickly questioned Martin Smart, father of Justin, the boy who'd been found unharmed in the next room. Martin had military experience. He lived just a few cabins away. That night, he'd allegedly burned clothing in the wood stove. Journal entry: Marilyn Smart, April 1981. Seized in police investigation. Marty hates Sue. He says she's trying to turn me against him. I don't know who to believe anymore. Despite mounting suspicions, Martin was never arrested. Neither was his friend B.O. Booby, a former convict who'd been staying with him at the time. Both men gave conflicting stories. Both failed polygraph tests. And yet, they walked away. Interview excerpt, Detective Doug Thomas, 1981. "We don't have enough. Not yet. We're still processing evidence." But evidence was mishandled. Blood samples lost. A hammer recovered years later that matched the description, but wasn't logged. A tape of a confession, allegedly made by Martin, never followed up on. And Tina? For 3 years she was missing. Then came the call. 911 recording transcript, Butte County Sheriff's Department, April 1984. "Yeah. I found part of a skull, near Feather Falls, just bones. Like from a kid, it was her." Tina's remains were scattered in the woods, 30 miles from Cabin 28. Her cause of death? Undetermined. The discovery opened old wounds. Why was Tina taken? Why were the other boys in the house left untouched? And why had no one in the sheriff's department connected the dots between the confession, the weapon, and the suspects next door? Internal memo, DOJ 1984 review meeting notes. Potential suspect with military background. Inconsistent alibi. Failed polygraph. Known connection to victim. Recommendation, pursue further interrogation. That never happened. Excerpt. Confidential memo, DOJ case review, 2013. Local law enforcement failed to pursue viable leads. Case was allowed to go cold, despite promising suspect profile. By the late 2000s, the story of Cabin 28 had faded into urban legend, whispered in podcasts, half remembered on cold case forums. But in 2013, a new team took over the investigation, and what they found was startling. Evidence that had been lost was recovered. New DNA analysis pointed to a living suspect. Handwritten notes from a now-deceased officer confirmed that key witness statements were ignored or destroyed. Found tape, interview with Justin Smart, 1981, previously unreleased. "I saw men in the living room. I heard arguing. There was screaming. One of them had a knife. I think it was Marty." Justin's polygraph had indicated deception, but at the time, he was just a boy. Now investigators believed he had seen the entire thing, and that someone had made sure he stayed. Silent. Memo -2016 Plumas County Cold Case Unit. Working theory. Crime was personal. Not random. Tina was likely abducted as part of cover-up or retaliation. Suspects known to victims. Despite new evidence, no charges were ever filed, but the horror of Cabin 28 lives on. In documentaries, books, and forums, and in the memories of a girl who opened the front door to her worst nightmare. Interview Sheila Sharp, 2021. "I still don't go into cabins. I still don't close the door all the way when I sleep. I know what I saw, and I know who did it." The Keddie Murders were not the work of a madman in the woods. They were not a ghost story. They were a brutal, targeted act, hidden behind incompetence and silence, and though Cabin 28 has long since been demolished, the blood and the questions remain. It's tempting to believe horror is something far away, something supernatural. But the truth is much worse. Sometimes it's in a rented cabin, a neighbor's window, a voice on the phone that says, "You should come by. Something's not right." And sometimes the real monster lives next door. The Fear Archive.